Thank you for the opportunity to speak here. This is going to not be an overview. This is going to be about a single project that we've been working on for about the past 2 years that was originally released in April and was presented at the International Conference for Computer Vision 2 weeks ago in Paris. A lot of people were involved in this project. None of us have any medical or biological expertise, so there will be no cool imaging images. There will be pictures of cats. That is our domain. I guess I want to jump straight to the punchline on what the project is about. So this is an open source project that comes out of FAIR that basically has two things that were released. One is a large neural network for performing something that we call promptable object segmentation, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means. That has broad generalization across tasks and domains. And so what we're hoping there is that even if we've never seen your domain before, that maybe our model, if this task is useful to you in some way, will be a valuable starting point, even if we don't, like you said, don't have any medical expertise. The second thing that the project releases is a large, the largest actually, like 400 times larger than existing data sets, large data set of object masks for scene level images. And so to break down what a couple of these words mean, promptable object segmentation, which is something I'll get into in a little bit, basically means I have an image, I indicate an object, I want to figure out which pixels in that image associated with the object that I indicated. Object masks are basically just the data for that. If I have a bunch of objects in an image, which pixels are associated with each object? And by scene level images, I mean regular photographs, such as pictures of the city, pictures of the cat, so on and so forth. So in order to break down all of this, and then by open source, this is all freely available, both the data set and the model, and this at our website here, I'll put it also at the end. So to break down what all of these pieces are, there's a couple of things I need to go through. What the task is that we're trying to solve, how the model that we built solves it, the data set we've trained that model on, and then a little bit of evaluation to try to indicate that we really do have some generalization beyond the domain of data that we trained on. And then I'll finish up with some limitations and conclusions. So starting with the task, what do I mean by promptable segmentation? So if we take an input image, such as these cats, and I add some prompt that indicates the object that we want. In this case, it's one point on the cat, indicated by this green dot. The goal is to find all the pixels that are associated with the cat. And so the output should be an object mask or a binary label on each pixel that says this is part of the cat or it is not part of the cat. And on the right-hand side here, all the bright pixels have been determined by the model to be part of the cat, and all of the dark pixels have been determined to be not part of the cat. So this is a task that humans are very good at. If you focus on something or I point something out to you, even if it's an object you don't maybe have a name for, you've never seen before, it's very easy to separate it out from all the stuff in the background. But it's a challenging problem for computers. It's some combination of edge detection and having some intuitive sense of what an object is, and so on and so forth. So to go beyond just the single example and to kind of define what we're trying to solve a little bit more formally, maybe, the goal here is to take an input prompt that indicates an object, return some valid mask for an object associated with that input prompt. On the last slide, the input prompt was like a point that indicated the object. One point, maybe there's multiple points on the object, as well as negative points off the object that indicate that area is not the region you're interested in. Maybe there's a box around the object. Maybe you have some sort of approximate mask or dense heat map that's in the area of the thing you're interested in. And then going up in complexity, you could imagine also inserting text that points to an object via semantics, so, such as like a cat with black ears pointing at this cat on the right-hand side. So the goal is to be kind of agnostic in the task definition to what sort of prompt that we've input. There's one final thing in the definition of what we're trying to solve that we need to work out, which is if I put a point on an object that may not correspond to a single unique thing. A point on, say, someone's chest may indicate the logo on their shirt. It might indicate their shirt. It might indicate them. And so the goal of the model is to return at least one valid object. It's not trying to guess which one you want, but it should return something that's correct. Okay. So why do we care about this? There's a couple of reasons. One is this is kind of very nicely composable with other models. Say I have a model that detects cats. and outputs a bounding box around a cat. I can take that. If I have one of these promptable segmentation models that's very good and very general, I can just plug that box right into the model and get out a full mask for the cat. And if the model's general, you could imagine doing this in kind of unusual fields. So maybe I have a very specific type of mushroom detector, and I get a box for that, and now I can pull out exactly that mushroom, even though our model has not been trained on that exact sort of thing. The second thing is that these sorts of prompts are very easy to simulate at training. So if I have a very large data set of masks, I don't need inputs to the model explicitly labeled in the data set. I can sample them directly from the mask. So I can sample points from the mask, or I can sample boxes around the mask. And finally, it enables human-in-the-loop annotation. So we're going to need to get our data set from somewhere. If you have a model that is reasonably good at this or is good at this, humans can go and annotate a very large amount of data in your model by going to an image and clicking on a bunch of stuff. And instead of having to very carefully annotate the object, they pick it up in just 1 or 2 clicks. So these are the reasons that we were interested in this specific task. So the next thing to move on to is how we're actually going to solve the problem. The thing that we call it SAM, for segment anything model, and it's going to be the model that solves this particular task. And so it's a large neural network that is broken down into a couple pieces that I'll walk through here. The first step that we do is I actually ignore the prompts entirely. So we don't care about what object you're interested in. We take just the image and we put it through a heavyweight backbone. So this is something that's probably going to have to run on GPU. In our biggest models, it's a huge vision transformer adapted for high resolution. And it's completely independent of the input prompts, and it outputs an image embedding that we'll use later in the process. And the benefit of doing this is that you only have to run it once per image. If you're interested in multiple objects in the image, you don't have to spend this compute multiple times. And it can also be pre-computed. If you don't know what you want in advance, you can run this and you can get the image embeddings and you can hold on to them. Okay, so the next step is to encode the prompts. And this has to be done differently for every prompt. Because they're each unique. But the basic idea is that it should be fairly lightweight most of the time. The exception is text, where we use something much heavier, but this is kind of a special case I'll talk about at the end. And in this case, it's very lightweight. It's like for points and boxes. I guess I can use this as an opportunity to step back and say one thing that I forgot. While I call this heavyweight, compared to the really popular models right now, which are large language models, it's quite small. And so it's actually fairly reasonable to say, like, it's feasible to possibly fine-tune the entire model on a single GPU, where even the smallest large language models are larger than some of our largest models. So I guess for prompts, we can code, for instance, the points and box inputs just via their positions and a single learned embedding that says what type they are. So are they a foreground point? Are they a background point? Is it a top left corner of a box? Is it a bottom left right corner of a box? And that's the entire way we encode those inputs. The masks are encoded via a very tiny convolutional network that's also very cheap. So with the images encoded into embeddings and the prompts encoded into embeddings, the goal is to combine these together to get out masks. And what we use is a very lightweight transformer. And the benefit of this lightweight transformer is that it can run very quickly, even on CPU in browser. So it takes like 50 milliseconds on CPU in your browser to do this step. And this has 2 big benefits. One is that it allows real-time human interaction. So you can put the image in front of people, they can click, they can see if the mask is right or wrong or the object that they want, they can click again if it's not the thing they want. And the other benefit is that it allows you to run very many input prompts on an image fairly efficiently. And we're going to use both of these things later on in the presentation. The final thing I need to mention is what actually comes out of the model. It outputs 1 or 3 masks, and I'll talk on the next slide what that means, as well as a prediction of the quality of that particular mask. So to go a little bit into the details, I said the original goal of the task was to output a single, at least one valid mask for any prompt. But there's an issue here that if you take an ambiguous prompt, let's see if yes, like this point here, which might indicate the whole wall, it might indicate the whole word Zurich, maybe it just indicates the Z, and train the model so that it sometimes sees this case and sometimes sees this case and sometimes sees this case. Its loss will be the average of those three, and it will learn to produce the average mask of those three. And while any one of them is right, the average mask is wrong. And so in order to break that symmetry, what we do is we return three separate masks, even if we only care about getting one valid one out of the other end. And even in the single best mask, this improves the quality significantly. Although sometimes you can see from the examples on the right-hand side here, these are all model predictions. Sometimes all three masks are good and correspond to different objects. And then finally, if we're outputting multiple masks, we have to predict which one is actually best. And to do that, we calculate the overlap between the predicted mask and the ground truth in the data set, and just predict and train the model to predict that. And so it predicts a score of mask quality. I said one or three masks. When you have multiple input prompts, this ambiguity very rapidly goes away. With just a few points, it's usually pretty unique what object you're interested in. And we found for both model performance and training speed, it was faster to just predict a single mask in these cases. So that's where the one or three comes from. Okay, so that's the basic overview of what the model does. Now we need to train it. And there's an issue we run into immediately, which is these large foundation models that generalize very well to all sorts of things, usually do so by training on very large scale data, like the large language models ingest like trillions of tokens of text. That large scale data does not exist for object masks because it's very expensive to collect. If you have an annotator sit there and very pixel perfect, like go around a mask, it can take like 4 or 5 minutes to mask a single object. So this doesn't exist, and we wanted to create it. And the way we decided to, or the way we went about creating it was to use the fact that the model can be a annotation tool. And so we set up this data engine where what we call the data engine, where we start with a model that's not very good. We put it in front of annotators. They can annotate masks faster, not super fast because it's bad. But we can train the model on the new data they collect. The model gets better, the annotators get faster. We repeat that process several times until the model's really good. And what finally came out of the other side of this was a very large data set that was ultimately entirely automatically generated of a billion masks, over a billion masks on 11 million images. We managed to get I guess, permissive licensing for these images so that they can be used for research purposes and are released. So we do this process in 3 stages that we call assisted manual, semi-automatic, and fully automatic. I'll go briefly through what those 3 stages are. The assisted manual stage is what I described. You have an image. We tell the annotators annotate every object in this image up to some time limit where then they move on to something else because otherwise they'd be there forever. To annotate something like this building, maybe they have to click a lot of time because the model's not very great. So there's like 4 clicks on here. Maybe there's still errors like this region down here where they can then go in and edit manually to clean up the mask. And after iterating on this process 6 times, by collecting data and retraining the model up to like 6 times, we got the mask collection speed down to like 13 seconds, which is significantly better than 5 minutes. And in this stage, we collected around 4 million masks on 120,000 images. But there's a problem that arises that if you tell annotators to just annotate every object in an image, they pick all the easy stuff every time. And so to really have a model that could generalize well and annotate anything, we wanted to increase the mask diversity. And so what we did in the second stage was we had a lot of data. We trained a model to predict objects that were like our data. And so it got good at understanding what annotators produce. We fed that detector through our model SAM to get masks. And then we gave those masks to the annotators and told them to annotate something else. And so that was a kind of semi-automatic way to push the mask diversity to different types of objects. And in this phase, we annotated another 6 million masks on another 180,000 images and retrained the model 5 more times. After all of this data collection, the model is good enough that for a single input point, it often returns a pretty high quality mask, which means that we can now generate all the masks in an image just by sampling a grid of input points across the entire image. And because the model runs very fast per input, this can be done efficiently. So per image, we were generating something like 3,000 or 4,000 masks, I believe. And then many of them are duplicates, and they have to be filtered down to the sort of image you see on the right-hand side. And we use this to basically fully automatically generate masks for all 11 million images in our data set, yielding around 1.1 billion masks. And then this is the thing that we train our final model on, and those are the weights we release. So it has seen a very large number of examples. And to give an example of some of these masks in the data set, which we refer to as SA1B for segment anything 1 billion, they span, they're all scene level images, but they span a large range of images that are fairly sparse and do not have very many masks. The ones here in this example run from up to 100 masks, but there are also images in the data set that are very complicated and have well over 500 masks. So at least in terms of this form of diversity, the data set is fairly diverse. Okay, so that is the model and how we trained it. The goal now is to argue that there is at least some ability to generalize beyond these scene level images that we trained the data set on, or trained the model on. And so in order to do that, what we did is we went out and collected a kind of diverse suite of different evaluation data sets that are mostly out of distribution to SA1B. So this data set, these data sets, there's a bunch of examples of kind of one from each of them here. They include things that are relatively close, like Elvis is still scene level images, to things that get fairly far away, like X-ray scans of luggage, or a cell data set, or synthetic bumps on asteroids. So there's a kind of a wide range of unusual settings here. And what we would like to do is to return to the original task. The task is that for an input prompt, the model should return a valid mask always. The hardest case of this is when your input prompt is just a single point. If you add extra points or boxes, you're adding more information. And so we evaluate this data set or evaluate all of these data sets by taking the masks in the data set, sampling the center point, feeding that into the model, and then seeing how the model does compared to the ground truth. And here I'm showing a comparison to a model called Rhythm, which is another strong interactive segmentation model that works on points, so it can do the same thing. And while results vary data set to data set, on average, our model is much stronger kind of across all of the data sets. I'm showing two different things on these 23 data sets. The bar plot takes the mask that comes out of SAM that has the highest score. But there's a problem. The same ambiguity issue that occurs at training occurs at evaluation. Maybe because SAM has not been trained on any of these data sets, it doesn't know what the right object is, and so it's very possible it's returning a valid but incorrect object for the data set in question. So we also show, just to make the argument, of the three masks that SAM outputs, which one best matches to the ground truth. And this is cheating a little bit for evaluation because we have to look at the ground truth, pick the one that matches best. But you can see on the circle part of this plot that in all the data sets, this is kind of a significant improvement. So make the argument that at least one of the three masks is pretty good, even if the model doesn't know which one is the one it should be returning. And then we can also just go to higher numbers of points. The interactive segmentation model tends to catch up. The goal here was not to train a model that it was good for refinement, where at many clicks that you're cleaning up the edges. The interactive segmentation models start to do better in that regime. And then I don't have it on the slide, but just for more evidence that we generally produce good masks, we put a bunch of examples in front of human annotators, and they generally rated our masks to be, I guess, higher quality, again, in a subjective sense. For transfer to other computer vision tasks, I don't want to get into every metric on every task because they're all a little different, but I wanted to give a flavor of kind of how you can think about different tasks coming from this model. So from this automatic mask prediction procedure, where you generate a lot of masks via sampling points over an image, you can take all of those masks, you can convert them to edges, and you can do edge detection. Or you can take all of those masks and treat each of one of them as a proposal for possible object, and you can measure your recall against the data set. You can see whether you're getting every object in the data set. In general, we perform not as well as things that are trained directly on these data sets, but much better than other zero-shot methods, and often pretty close to the things that are trained directly on the data sets. We can also test this idea of using model composition. We can take an object detector that says, trained to find cats and elephants and so on and so forth. Take the boxes from that object detector, run it through our model, get the masks. Despite the fact that we were not, directly trained on this task while the object detector was, our masks are often higher quality than the object detector's masks. And then something I don't really have much time to go into, but it was a proof of concept. It also looks like the checkboxes maybe didn't survive, but by training the model a different way, using a clip encoder to encode each mask in a manner that is similar to text that's associated with that image, we can do a kind of proof of concept of prompting via text. It's hard to see in the example, but you can pull out like the wheel or the grill of the car by inputting text. But this was just proof of concept. All right, so I guess that's the basic set of ideas. We have a model that I guess I'll run through some quick limitations, to be fair, that I grouped in a couple different ways. These first three are related to the fact that in order to reach high scale, we can't really be pixel perfect on every mask that we train on. Our general assumption was that getting a broad sense of what an object is was the hard part, and if you need to go through and post-process and clean up the edges, there are other methods for that. And indeed, since we've released the project, at least one group has fine-tuned the model on a smaller set of much higher quality data and shows that you can get higher quality masks by doing that. Then the next thing I just wanted to point out is that the model is quite fast, but it's a kind of an amortized real time because you have to run the heavy part of the model on the image first, which makes it a little harder to say run on video. The text part is just preliminary, too far. And then the last thing is that the zero-shot transfer to domains is cool, but you might expect that domain-specific information probably works better. But the thing that I guess we kind of hope is that this is a strong starting point for something you might, for including domain-specific information beyond this point. To give a, I guess, analogy to humans, many of the sophisticated images that require some degree of expertise, like scientific images require some degree of expertise to read. But you or I do not have to look at 100,000 examples in order to build that expertise. We can start from our ability to kind of pull out things that we've learned from our general experience in the world and use fairly few new data to accomplish the specialized tool, the task. So what we're hoping is that either through some engineering of the prompt inputs to the model or via fine-tuning on smaller data sets, we can get strong results out of this model on whatever task you might want to extract objects from. So in conclusion, we have kind of two main outputs that are physical objects, the model SAM and the dataset SA1B, as well as this task promptable segmentation that is both a training and inference task. And the segment anything project as a whole is kind of an attempt at a foundation model for segmentation, but whether that succeeds, it depends on whether it ends up being useful to people. So we're going to see how that goes. It was well received in the beginning, but it'll be, time will tell. People did some cool things. They were like extracting craters on asteroid surfaces, or like fish in sonar images, or storms in meteor settings. So I'm hoping that for whatever thing in the future you might need it for, it might be helpful. And just to put the website there again, all the resources are there.
Thanks so much, Eric. We're really fortunate to have you join us today just to talk about this exciting work. And we did have some students over the summer who were playing around with your segment anything model on medical images. So if people in the audience are interested in touching base, I think Narges was one of the main, Narges Razavian was one of the folks here who helped supervise those students. Do we have some questions? Surely we have some questions for Dr. Mintun.
Hi, thanks. At some point, you switched to fully automatic labeling.
Mm-hmm.
Why weren't you done at this point? What was left to do?
We were done at that point. After fully automatic labeling, we trained the model once more on all of that fully automatically labeled stuff, and that was our final model that we released and did all of this evaluation on. Yeah, that was the final stage.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. What do you think might be some like super exciting applications for this tool?
So I guess my super exciting applications are in our domain. And so in computer vision research, it is like we need large scale data for these sorts of segmented objects. Segmentation is kind of a low level task, but there's harder tasks based around like semantic grounding, like here's a sentence, can you find all of the objects that's referred to in the sentence, or can you find all the cats in the image or something like that. Being able to do that generally would benefit from large scale semantically labeled masks. But so the thing that I guess I'm so excited about is the ability to have this gigantic data set of unlabeled things as a starting point for labeling them. You can, for instance, take all 1 billion masks and like run them, like crop to them and run them through a classifier to get an approximate sense of what they are. And then that starts to kind of, in the same way we kind of laddered our way up to large scale data for segmentation. It would be cool if you could like ladder your way up to like more sophisticated data sets in and segmentation.
Because you could see that those, like the carrots and the radishes had sort of, every single one was a different color. And yet in the actual photo, they were red and orange and white.
Even if you don't know what those objects are, having them be reduced to 100 or 200 objects in the image is so much more discrete than the 1 million pixels that was originally part of the image that I'm really hoping it's a starting point for doing all these other things.
Do we have one more quick comment from the audience?
A quick question. Did you consider extending this for segmenting volumes in 3D?
So we never considered it. Everything gets harder when you have another dimension because it's more expensive. I guess, and okay, it's both more expensive and the data gets rarer. So I guess there's two ways of asking that, which is, could we do the whole thing for volumes? And I think it would be hard to find large enough scale data that was volumetric. And then the second question is, can you take something like this and pull some tricks to have it apply to volumes where you segment in like slices and then you match the slices up so that it makes sense. And like we haven't explored that, but I would hope that there are like some cool strategies there that could leverage this for that purpose. Yeah.
Dan?
Yeah, just quickly, I'm interested not just in your segmentations, but also in your feature vectors that you've trained. Because I'm wondering, a radiologist trains for years to understand anatomy and, make calls off of that. I wonder to what extent you believe some higher level knowledge is now buried in your feature vectors, and could we use those as inputs to reconstruction algorithms to break degeneracies or other things like that?
Yeah. So we spent a little bit of time looking at what the feature vectors looked like. So you could get pretty pictures. It has definitely some sort of structure. but it's kind of its own. Unlike many models in detection are like semantically trained. So you put in like its job is to go find a cat, and so it has to encode in its semantics some idea of what a cat is. Here, it's still a fairly low-level task because it doesn't have to know what any of the semantics is, and so it learns I guess the example I could give you is that when we looked at the feature maps, objects very clearly split into two types. There were the foreground objects that would be hard, like the sorts of things that would maybe have multiple parts, and so you had to distinguish all those parts, or it was maybe they would be obscured because they were in front, and so the model would have to link the two pieces together. So all of those had one set of feature vectors, and then all the rocks in the background would have another. And what it seemed like it was doing was just that for simple, smaller objects, it was just marking it as simple and smaller, and then finding the edges of those objects. And so the model kind of has its own semantics there. Whether that can be leveraged for something, it would have to be played around with. It's not necessarily obvious that it's quite as clear as a semantic model, a trained model. Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much.